Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
How you get a driver's license varies wildly from state to state, and it's changed over time. So nowadays it's different how you get a driver's license compared to what it was when I turned 16, not so long ago. But a story out of Massachusetts from NBC 10 Boston, sent to me by Edward and Andrew, Mary, Marcos, Alsha Palumbo, and Abby Nisgoda wrote it. RMV employees fired for faking more than 2,000 road tests. So there's the written test and the road test. Go out and drive. Turns out that they may have cut some corners and not done the road test. So 2 road test examiners and 2 service center employees were fired from the Brockton Service Center for granting licenses without a road test. And this is going to get uglier because now a couple thousand drivers in Massachusetts have got to retake their road tests because they say they weren't required to take it the first time, but they should have been. So in a 2-year scheme, Brockton Service Center employees granted licenses without road tests starting in April of 2018, when a registry of motor vehicles, or the RMV supervisor, noticed suspicious activity. The RMV launched an internal investigation and referred the issue to law enforcement and the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, or MassDOT. During the investigation, the RMV determined that approximately 2,100 drivers were given their licenses without taking a road test. 2 road test examiners and 2 service center employees were fired as a result of this, and they were both from all of them from the Brockton Service Center. Letters have been sent to customers who did not complete the road test, according to MassDOT, and they've been told you need to come in and take the road test. And some people, as you can imagine, are not happy about that. But there's a little more controversy here because some people said they did take the road test, so they're not sure what this is all about. Somebody from the MassDOT said all of the impacted individuals have been contacted and will be required to take and pass a road test within 10 days. The RMV has terminated 4 employees involved in the matter and will continue to work with law enforcement on their ongoing investigation. We've got an ongoing investigation. If the affected drivers don't take the road test within 10 days, their license will be suspended. If they take it and don't pass, they'll be given a learner's permit. So you could have been driving for a while, a couple of years, on a driver's license, and you could wind up with a driver's permit instead of a license because you can't pass the driving test. If you've been driving for 4 years, you should be able to pass driving tests, but you never know. The testing will be free, according to the RMV, and affected drivers will be allowed to schedule appointments outside of normal road test hours if need be. So there's no charge for this, just the inconvenience. Now, several drivers affected told NBC 10 out of Boston that they've been notified that they need to retake their tests, but they vividly remember taking the road tests. One person said, I don't know why my license is going to be suspended. I want an explanation. Another woman said she watched her son take the road test 3 years ago. She said he's now away at college and can't come back in time to retake it in this short time frame. And she's curious as to why he should retake it because she says she watched him take the test. I don't know how he got lumped into this. There was no wrongdoing by a lot of people who took their tests and are now being told they have to come in and retake them. I need more answers, she said. So the question is, how many people does she know that this happened to? A state senator who serves in the state's Joint Oversight Committee on Transportation said he'd like some answers as well. He plans to call for a series of hearings on the issue to get to the bottom of it. He said, this is a disaster, a complete meltdown. My first question is what happened? Because they're being incredibly vague and limited in what they're telling us. How many people are impacted and how did this happen? Well, 2,100 people are impacted, and it happened because 2 examiners decided to skip the tests. At least that's the allegation. So there's your answers. I'm not sure if you need to have a series of hearings, but if you'd like to, go right ahead. RMV officials said they've taken steps since April of 2021 to prevent this from happening again, including instituting additional controls in its system used for licensed transactions, such as adjusting access to functions in the RMV system, revising business processes, and implementing enhanced monitoring and auditing of licensed transactions. The beleaguered agency has a history of costly administrative mistakes. Costly administrative mistakes. For example, the RMV revealed in 2019 that it failed to act on thousands of violations committed by Massachusetts drivers in other states, potentially allowing dangerous drivers to stay on the road. in the wake of a crash that killed 7 people in New Hampshire in June of 2019. Transportation officials revealed that the RMV failed to process thousands of notifications it received from other states, which allowed them to just simply pile up in boxes for years. So somebody's inbox was this deep, and they just didn't have time to get to it. As the RMV worked to sift through a massive backlog of driving violations that came to light, the agency punished scores of innocent drivers, taking away their licenses in error and forced some into a frustrating appeals process that can take weeks to resolve. Trust me, an appeals process with your DMV or your RMV or your Secretary of State's office, you don't want to get involved in that. I've actually handled an appeal somebody had with the Secretary of State's office in Michigan, and it was so lopsided and unfair that I would argue that if you said, Steve, of all the due process you've seen, and you put it on a sliding scale, best being where somebody really got the process necessary to make sure they got, justice, versus what was the worst you ever saw. The worst I ever saw was a hearing at the Secretary of State's office. It was absurd. The hearing officer didn't understand the law. The hearing officer didn't understand logic. The hearing officer barely understood English from what I could tell. But it was unbelievable. So that's crazy. But here's the thing. If there is an RMV office someplace and people come in to take driving tests, you would think that everybody would realize whether or not driving tests are being conducted. I mean, are these offices really that big? Because I know in Michigan, they're fairly small. And so technically for someone to go out and do the test, everybody would see them go out and do it and come back, So I find it kind of surprising that this happened for so long and only 4 people knew about it. That's what strikes me as odd. But the whole idea of the driving test itself, I think it's necessary. But I've heard some states have done away with it. Wouldn't surprise me. Nowadays, they do away with all kinds of stuff to save money. I remember my driving test. I took it in a Gremlin. I do not have a photograph of the car that I drove for a little while to high school. But it was a green Gremlin. And I took the driving test in a green Gremlin. And I still passed the test, so that was fine. And I got to drive myself around, which was also fine. But I know all kinds of crazy stories. And these are stories that I know to be true. So I knew a girl who went to my high school who, in her driving test, hit a cop car. Now, everyone who knew her believed, yes, that's the kind of thing she would do. But it didn't cause any damage. But what happened was at the time, Secretary of State's office in Birmingham was downtown Birmingham. And Old Woodward Avenue ran right in front of it. And so you go out and get in your car and have you drive around Birmingham. And she pulled up to a stop sign, but she was the second car, direct in front of her was a police car. And she got nervous and tapped the cop car. No damage, but it was embarrassing. And I believe she still passed. I believe, or she may have gone back and taken it later, but no harm, no foul. I know she has a driver's license today, but that was a little while ago. I also know somebody who, in the old days, I'm talking the old days, okay? I can ballpark for you, about 1940, but a relative of mine, walked into the Secretary of State's office near where she lived, said, I'd like a driver's license. And the guy goes, how do I know you can drive? And she goes, I drove here. She got a license. Back then, the licensing requirements were not as stringent as they are today. So nowadays, they make you take a test and they make you go for a drive, and you got to pass both. So it's strange because the question is, are they correct in that these 2,100 people did not take the driving portion of the test? Or is it possible they're simply saying, well, look, we know it started here, it ended here. Everyone in between's got to take the test. Because if you took the test to make you come back in and retake it, or you could lose your license and somebody's at school might not be able to, that would be unfair. And I'm just curious to know how they arrived at that figure. And did they actually determine who did and did not take the tests? Because I can also imagine somebody who goes in, doesn't take a test, whether they're told you're not taking a test, they just said, hey, here's your license, and walk out. Someone might realize that they didn't take the test, but hey, I got my license. Now they say, look, I took a test. How would you prove otherwise? So that's another problem altogether. So it's a crazy story out of Massachusetts, but at least 4 employees have been fired from the RMV for faking, the allegation is, 2,100 road tests. And they've identified those people and said, you got to come back and retake your test. And if you pass, you get to keep your license. If you don't pass, you get a learner's permit. And if you don't come back in, your license is suspended, which is kind of harsh. So the story is sent to me by Edward and Andrew and Mary Marcos, Alicia Palumbo, and Abby Nizgoda wrote it. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Spiders and snakes are an important part of the ecosystem.